Political analyst Sandile Swana now joins us via video link to unpack the DA Manifesto launched today at the Union Buildings in Pretoria. Sandile, good afternoon. Thanks for your time with the SABC at this hour.
Good afternoon, Lizelle, and good afternoon to the viewers of SABC News.
Well, Sandile, let's get straight into it. We obviously saw the launch, the manifesto taking place today. And given what was echoed, given the attendance as well, what are you observing? Let's look at how this is indicative of the party's growth and relevance at large.
I think the DA and Steenhuisen, for who they are and what they are, today, they were brilliant in etching on the minds of South Africans the reality that Ramaphosa and the African National Congress are no longer guaranteed a continuing presence in the Union Buildings or even in the reins of power in this country, to the extent that the rulership or governance of the ANC of South Africa is most likely to end this year.
So on the back of that, we look at the sentiments echoed by John, outlining the key priorities, the ideas, the messaging as well. What's coming to the fore on that front? So we're looking at issues of load shedding, water shedding, job creation, corruption, looking at solving the issue of violent crime as well. The question is whether they can be more effective as a opposition party against the ruling party without existing solely to bash the ruling party. Anything inspiring on that front?
Yes, the list of the 7 promises is in front of me. I think if I were to say this before I touch on the list itself, very quickly, anybody, including the DA and the ANC, they are all in the same position. This election is about selling whatever ideas you have about any topic, including the 7 that Steenhuisen spoke about, to the voting public on the one hand, and on the other hand, to your likely alliance partners. The DA and the ANC would like, as South Africans would put it, to slam the Qatar, but those days are over. You are not going to slam any Qatar. You are going to negotiate every inch of these 7 promises. But I want to talk about this issue of effectiveness that we are raising. I'll just take one topic because we're short of time.
Sure.
Create 2 million new jobs over 5 years. The number of jobs that needs to be created, if your backlog is about 12 million jobs already unemployed and 600,000 new job entrants every year, at least you should be talking about creating about 1.6, 1.7 million new jobs, not 2 million jobs in 5 years. So the DA is boasting today about its ability to reduce unemployment to 20%. That has got the lowest unemployment rate in South Africa at 20%. The role models of the DA, the United States, for instance, is maintaining an unemployment rate of 3.7, which is something like 5 times lower than the DA's one. Germany, which is another role model, is at about 5%, again 4 times lower than the DA. So the DA is nowhere near the standards that unemployment should be measured at. It has failed. It has not reached the 6% annual growth rate envisioned by the African Union for all African countries. It has not reached the 5.4% envisaged in the NDP. So the DA itself is only looking excellent because of the extraordinary, unmitigated mediocrity of the African National Congress. The DA itself is actually failing. So I think that the words of Padili Huta, as well as the words of General Bantu Olomisa, of having a government of national unity, need to be taken into consideration. Our 2 biggest parties are not stars of excellence.
Well, Sandile, just on the back of that, looking at the demographics and South Africa's unique context as well, and also the priorities that had been put forth, just on the back of what you've echoed, then can the DA for this year remake itself to align with the black majority, obtain that vote? Perhaps also looking at the multi-charter party that's, that's obviously also coming to the fore on that front, and how dynamics could be affected. What do you observe on that front then?
First of all, I think the DA continues. You will remember that the DA has got a large contingent in its membership of the national party that rules South Africa. So a large percentage of the DA, maybe 80% or more, is actually the national party. Others are the Pretoria Bond. Others are the DP, the Democratic Party, or the Progressive Federal Party, which was about 2% or so in 1994. So a very small percentage of the DA are liberals, true liberals. Otherwise, these are supporters of apartheid. These were the people who were in partnership with apartheid Israel for many years. And that partnership is being demanded by the DA today. And I would say that that alone is enough to annoy a lot of its voters in the Western Cape and in the Islamic communities around South Africa, which are a significant number relative to any other constituency, like, for instance, the Jewish constituency or the Zionists, for that matter. Let's not include all the Hebrews in this. So that's one failure. The other failure is that the presence of people like Bongani Baloyi, the presence of Herman Mashaba, the presence of Musi Maimane, and many others who have been backstabbed by perhaps attitudes of white supremacy in the DA, or questionable race relations within the DA. We know that there are white people who get along with Bandustan-type black people, as opposed to independent black people. So those things are going to be a problem for the DA.
And the party itself having found itself in the middle of some of the controversies, given their policies, both foreign and domestic, how do you think that's also going to add a spanner in the works for them, or play to their favor?
The parties, this manifesto, which is in front of me now, these things they've listed here are not uncontroversial. That is why I would say, after reading this little manifesto here, I would still want to call a national summit where these things have to be discussed. For instance, this preoccupation with privatization is an error, a moral error and an economic error, as well as a governance error, to be sincere. Because every other week we are reading about South African companies and multinational corporations who are implicated in price fixing, in setting up secret cartels against the laws of the Republic of South Africa. So corruption is endemic in the private sector in South Africa, including the financial services, the banking sector, the auditing professions, and so on and so forth. So to say you are going to take assets of the state and services of the state to the private sector in order to reduce non-performance and corruption is actually an unreasonable statement. So that point 4 of Steenhuisen, crush corruption by abolishing cadre deployment, and so on, is not enough. The corruption is embedded in corporate South Africa as we speak today.
And what about managing its own internal affairs? What's it indicative of? How will that also then obviously play out on a macro level from your vantage point?
I mean, there's a big problem in South African politics which we would all have to discuss. But if we're speaking about the DA still needs to come out clean to the South African public as to when you talk about the internal arrangements, for instance, the disappearance of people like Mpho Phalatse and others and so on and so forth. We need to have a sense of what does big business do in the DA? How much of this manifesto and the operations and governance of the DA is guided by proper social science, and how much of it is just billionaires dictating terms to them, such that irrational decisions and sometimes racist decisions are being made? So to me, those are some of the problems that the DA needs to be a little bit honest about.